I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. As ever, the show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is writer and commentator John Gaunt, and also comedian Abby Roberts. Before we get started, though, let's get your latest news headlines.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts. This is your news at 4 o'clock. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel that was detained for not having a licence. French prosecutors have summoned the boat's captain to appear in court next August. The Environment Secretary, George Eustace, told GB News Navy vessels will be used if needed.
We want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this. But we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
The US president has held what's been described as an unusually long meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican. Officials said the private meeting, which addressed the pandemic, climate change and poverty, lasted an hour and 15 minutes. Joe Biden, who's in Europe for the G20 summit as well as COP26, has left a fraught domestic agenda in limbo back at home. His fellow Democrats have abandoned plans to vote for the president's nearly $3 trillion spending plan. A serving Met police officer has been charged with child sex offences. 51-year-old Detective Constable Francois Olwage was arrested at an address in Basingstoke. He's facing 4 charges, including attempting to meet a girl under 16 years of age. The Scottish Government is providing £41 million to help families with their winter bills. The cash will be made available for those on low incomes who are struggling to pay for energy. It'll also help those at risk of homelessness. £6 million from the pot will go to charities that work with families in need. Coronavirus restrictions in Wales will be strengthened in a bid to curb infections, which are the highest in the UK. First Minister Mark Drakeford is reintroducing some measures, including guidance around self-isolation. Adults and young people aged 5 to 17 will soon be asked to isolate until they receive a negative PCR test. That's if someone in their household has symptoms or tests positive. COVID passes will also be extended to theatres, cinemas and concert halls. Essex police have arrested 10 people after Insulate Britain protesters gathered on the M25. The Eco group confirmed they'd attempted to block the road between junctions 28 and 29. Officers say both carriageways reopened within 30 minutes. It comes after an injunction was put in place by the High Court banning the group from obstructing traffic. MPs are warning the Crossrail project is facing a £150 million funding gap. The Commons Public Accounts Committee expressed doubts over how and when taxpayer loans will be repaid. That's after the collapse in fares revenue due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's predicted the cost of finishing the project is now at £18.9 billion. West Yorkshire police are searching for a pair of missing marsupials who are believed to have been kept as pets at a home in Leeds. The male and female wallabies, called Roxy and Amadeus, have gone missing from an address in the north of the city. Police are warning people not to get too close to the special animals, but instead to trap them and then call 101. The Mayor of London has received his booster COVID vaccination and winter flu jab. Sadiq Khan says that he hopes the move will encourage others to do the same ahead of winter. He also thanked the Health Secretary for the continued rollout of free vaccinations, adding that if he can get double jabbed, anyone can.
Well, I want to make sure everyone notes I was a very brave boy. If I didn't grimace, then anybody can do it. If I can take it, anybody can do it. And I took both jabs, the flu jab and the COVID vaccine, and I'm a wimp. So if I can do it, so can you.
Well, that's your news update. I'll be back in half an hour with the latest headlines. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
Now, I don't know about you, but I wasn't 100% clear how me eating less meat will actually help the planet. So I'm glad that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, said that he won't tell me to eat less meat either. Now, the reason I don't eat that much meat is because I study nutrition and I've worked out that too much of a good thing always makes it a bad thing. I respect all diets, as in the ways of eating, but I often find that many vegans somewhat smug in their approach, which is a tad irritating. And I hate phrases like vegan chicken. Look, it's not chicken. What's in it? So I did a bit of research as to why there is a call for people to stop eating meat, not just on health grounds, but also on planetary ones. And this is what I found. Now, meat production is directly linked with deforestation in the Amazon, often called the lungs of the world, where they burn land to clear it, grow crops on it, and then use it to house the animals. This produces loads of carbon, and this means that a lot of wildlife is destroyed, risking extinction of species. The animals farmed on the land then give off a load of methane, as does the manure, which is used as fertiliser. This animal production process also uses a lot of water, which can pollute the waterways, and this is made worse because grazing animals degrade soil, which then becomes full of, you guessed it, carbon. Wow. So, in fact, actually eating meat is not bad for the planet. It's the production methods that are the problem. Now, Winston Churchill predicted in his 1931 essay, 50 Years Hence, he wrote, "We shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken to eat the breast or wing by growing these parts separately under a suitable medium." Sounds a bit worrying, doesn't it? But since then, people have been trying to create just that. So in 2013, Professor Mark Post at Maastricht University pioneered cultured meat, and he created the first hamburger partly grown directly from animal cells. And in December last year, the world's first commercial sale of cell-cultured meat happened in Singapore. Now, this is an apparently painless process. Animal cells are harvested, they're fed and multiplied to create muscle tissue, which is the main component of the meat we eat and is biologically exactly the same. Ugh. I'm not sure whether this will catch on. Now, remember genetically modified food, GMO? I go out of my way to avoid it. Now, these are all great ideas, but what about cause and effect? The Earth is about balance, and just like electric cars and hydrogen boilers, there's always a downside that we haven't often considered, and one which doesn't come to light until things really get going. And ask yourself, would you be happy to eat lab-grown meat, or will you avoid it like the plague? I mean, what happens to the farmers, and what about human health? What if we find plants can feel pain? Would you eat a headless chicken? Is this really the way forward? Right, so before we get stuck into that debate, here's what else is coming up today. So on the way, are we set to see an escalation in tensions between the UK and France over fishing rights, as the French ambassador to the UK has been summoned by the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss? There's reports 2 Royal Navy vessels are on high readiness to tackle potential port blockades. But the Environment Secretary George Eustace says that the government don't want to retaliate.
We want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this. But we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
Crikey. And it's our big debate this hour. I'll be speaking to retired Admiral of the Royal Navy, Lord West Spithead. With COP26 just days away, we'll be speaking to the man behind the electric bus fleet tasked with driving visitors around the city during the conference. We'll also be asking, is electric the future for public transport? And this show is nothing without you and your views. So tell me what you think on everything we're discussing by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. Right, so let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, writer and commentator John Gaunt and comedian Abby Roberts. Right, so first I want to talk about the Chancellor. That's a very nice, cheesy smile, Abby, I must say. It was like...
I'm just looking at my hair. It's expanding.
Well, that's true, because
it's
true, because your eyes did sort of go to the sides of your head, so that was interesting.
I've been practising.
So what do you think? Chancellor Rishi Sunak has declared that he will not encourage us Brits to eat less meat, despite a call for a cut-down to help with climate change. But Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallis disagrees and is calling for us to cut down. What do you make of this? John's always likes his food, doesn't he? So I'm going to start with you, John.
I love red meat, and I love eating meat of all kinds, especially if it's nutrient-dense. It's very good that in your monologue you pointed out how meat is produced in other countries and how it's produced here. Often all these figures about carbon are based on what they do in America and in South America, where most of the cattle never see daylight. In our country, most of it is grass-fed. So as long as you check that it's that, I just don't think there's a problem. Eat better quality meat is what I would say. I agree with you as well. Vary it up. Nothing wrong with having a vegetarian meal or a vegan meal. My eldest daughter is living with a British Hindu who is a vegan. Now, he's a proper vegan, because his mum's a fantastic cook.
Well, you see, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you can have vegan food, you could fill yourself up with star mix. I don't think there's any meat in some of that.
Well, there's anything in it. Gelatin.
Well, some of them have the ones that aren't.
Perfect meat. Yeah, perfect vegan meals. The only problem is, even on those meals, you're not going to get B12. It's an impossibility. You have to take it as an extra vitamin. So I'm not anti-vegan. Anti-vegan sounds like anti-Mary, doesn't it?
Anti-vegan.
Anti-vegan's coming round today. Get out the vegetables. But no, the bottom line is this. Mix it up, match it up, no problem. But the idea that if you eat meat, somehow you're going to destroy the planet is so wrong. Butchers, I mean, some butchers are coming back, but I'm just fed up. And Sir Patrick Vallance, no. Same when it comes to air travel. No.
What do you think,
Same
Abby?
when it comes to jabs. No.
Okay.
But anyway, I just slip that in there because the way I look at it is we're starting to see now. You remember, I banged on quite a lot about the Great Reset, WEF,
slippery slope.
Slippery slope. This is all connected. This whole thing is an ideology based on the fact that they want to change the way we live as individuals. So things like eating meat, having cattle on grass, which actually is part of the ecosystem. What we're going to do is we're going to destroy what is natural. We're at the top of the food chain, and if we start messing around, we're going
to find far, far bigger worries
Well, that's
than,
what I
than
think.
a vegan diet.
Well, see, that's one of the things I was pointing out, that we think we've got it covered.
Yeah.
Then we come up with something that we think is a good idea because it'll do X, Y, and Z, but we haven't thought about A, B, and C. We haven't realised that actually that part of the whole biosphere, that cow eating that grass, actually feeds from his
Feeding the
mouth
soil,
nutrients, are feeding
the
the soil,
worms.
doing
Yeah.
this, doing
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and there's a whole process. And my concern is that, my concern is that we're going to start doing this, but then in the end we're going to have to now overcompensate for the thing that it's caused.
And we also know what the major problem is in this country is ultra-processed food, UPF. You speak to somebody like Asim Mahotra and he'll tell you this. Well, all of those pre-packaged foods, those vegan burgers, those no-meat burgers, whatever they're called, there's even a kebab now, which has got mock lamb in it. That's ultra-processed food. It's made in a laboratory, effectively. It can't be as good as having a nice piece of lamb or a piece of meat with loads of green vegetables on your plate, can it?
But the problem is, and actually, I mean, I don't think that's even, I don't even think anyone would argue with you there, but I think the real problem is, as we said, it's the production processes. So why can't we change those? Why does it need so much water? Why are they using so much water in this? Why is it so inefficient? And actually, one of the worst things is actually growing soya is actually one of the most inefficient ways of growing anything, and they use a lot of water. Why? And I've had people argue with me saying, well, the problem is they're growing the soy to feed the animals. But if they then start growing soy to feed us, there's more of us than the animals.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly. And then where are the animals going to go? They're going to
What are we
disappear.
going to do with the animals?
We have cows just
Are we going to
retiring.
extinct
I don't
species?
want to feed in into Abby's conspiracy theory.
Was that a pun?
But it is.
No, very good. I don't think he got. I think you were quicker than
See
him.
the way he delivered it, though. He went, feed in. He was a cigar.
But anyway, so not wishing to back up too much on this, but it's Bill Gates is behind a lot of this, and why?
Oh, come on!
Because
How did he get in on this?
He owns
this?
Loads and loads of agricultural land, and guess what he's growing?
Of course he does.
Soya.
Well,
so that's
But he also, you could say that, but then he also owns loads of things like Microsoft and all the other bits and pieces. So the pharmaceutical companies. So I don't really think that is a decent enough argument. I don't really think that.
I think it needs looking into, and going back to the cattle and the way we eat. We've got to get rid of this myth that we're doing the same as the Americans and other countries. We're not. In this country, we've got good farmers, good abattoirs, good standards in those abattoirs. We've got proper butchers. You can eat that meat. And when we were eating that meat in the 60s and 50s, we didn't have the obesity problems we've got now.
I think that's the thing. That's the other thing we haven't thought about. If you can eat all this meat and apparently there's nothing wrong with it and it's been grown in a lab and it's synthetically exactly the same or biologically the same, but it is still synthetic because it's been made up and it hasn't come from a full animal.
And also packaged probably using carbon dioxide.
Well, the thing is, again, it's the packaging. We need to look at different things. The packaging, how we're buying things, we're consuming them from supermarkets, and maybe we should be looking more locally and working within our own environment.
But unfortunately, that's not part of their ideology. I mean, you've just said something sensible, which is why can't we look at the way things are produced, farming, maybe like adjust things here and there, but they want to go all the way.
Mass production.
So eventually we are only eating plants, and I'm not kidding here, and we are going to be eating insects, because in their mind, these crazies, these elites, the WEF and all these people, they see us as kind of a bit inconvenient. Human beings. That's the truth of it. That's the truth
I think the other thing is as well, it's much easier to have cereal and plant-based things on the supermarket shelf because they'll last longer. Fresh meat, fresh fish, doesn't. And that's the move.
And you need carbon dioxide for packaging. Although I don't know why we're so hard on carbon. Everything's made of carbon. We're made of carbon. That's made of carbon. That's made of everything in this studio is made of carbon. We've gone down a very strange path.
That's what people keep talking about net zero and carbon as the word. Look, there's some credence to the fact that we are maybe contributing to the change in the climate, but that a change in the climate which will mean that we can no longer live on the planet, but the planet will continue to live without us anyway. So, we are trying to survive. We're trying to survive within the planet because the things we're doing are creating an environment that we can no longer, it's too volatile that we won't be able to live in. So I get it.
We're not creating all of that, are we?
No, but I think we're contributing to it.
Valance is basically making out it's all our fault.
Well, I don't think he's saying that, but he's basically...
He's not far off.
But he's...
Paid to say it.
Well, he's not really. He's basically coming up with the reverse reverse argument to Rishi Sunak, which is basically saying that he wants to encourage us not to eat so much meat as well. Look, I don't eat that much meat simply because chicken these days tastes like rubber. And also, I just, my father had high cholesterol, so we had a low cholesterol diet, which meant less red meat, very little salt. So that's the way I eat. I don't really eat that stuff.
I eat bacon, I eat steak. But that's about
I'll eat that as well, of course.
I'll eat that.
Yeah,
but I mean, we're not talking about... No one's Henry VIII nowadays. You know what I mean? With, like, piles of, like, chicken legs.
Well, some people might be. Mind you, these chickens won't have any heads. I mean, that's what they're saying.
I love that.
But in a sense, though, in a way, if for the cruelty aspect of the animals, I quite like the argument there, because you're not killing anything, which is that's a bit kinder, isn't it?
Yeah.
But again, that all comes back to standards. It all comes back to standards, including the abattoir, including the farming. If a chicken, I was reading, where was it, in China, they've now got tower blocks of pigs, of where pigs are living.
Oh, no,
That's where it's going.
That can't be right.
Pigsty.
I'll have to look into that. That sounds horrendous. Well, listen, join in to the conversation as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts after the break. It's time for our big debate this hour. Should the UK retaliate over French fishing threats? France's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office as the row over post-Brexit fishing rights dramatically escalated. 2 Royal Navy patrol vessels were also put on a state of high readiness to tackle potential port blockades. I'll be joined by retired Admiral of the Royal Navy, Lord West of Spithead. But next, it's up. Let's check out the weather.
We have further weather warnings in force right the way through the weekend and into the start of next week. More heavy rain in the forecast on top of the already saturated ground from the last few days. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, a big area of low pressure in the Atlantic sweeping various weather fronts right the way across the country. And there's more of that to come. In fact, the next one already waiting in the wings. This will bring another band of rain our way, heading in from the west through the course of this evening and overnight. And again, there will be some very heavy downpours associated with that band of rain. Either side, there will be some drier conditions, but with quite a lot of cloud associated with that band of rain, it won't be a particularly cold night for most of us. So Saturday starts on a wet note across western parts of the UK, and that band of rain will continue to trundle its way eastwards. It is actually moving slightly more quickly than some of the previous weather fronts have over the last few days, which is good news. And there are better conditions following on behind. So through Saturday afternoon and into the evening, drier conditions arrive from the west. Always the chance of a blustery shower, but some drier spells in between. And that's the case as we move through Saturday night. A lot of dry weather around, a few showers popping up here and there, especially across western parts of the country. And then yet another band of rain starts to edge in from the Atlantic. And this one will be with us first thing on Sunday morning. So it's a repeat performance for Sunday. Again, a wet start to the day for many of us, especially across western parts of the country. That rain, again, with some heavy downpours associated with it, gradually begins to track its way east and northwards, with some clearer conditions following on behind, which is good news if you're heading out trick-or-treating. Dry weather for some of us, but it remains unsettled into next week.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
So if you've just joined us, where have you been? I'm Nana Akua, you're watching GB News. Now, the UK has not ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over the post-Brexit fishing rights. The French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence. France's ambassador to the UK has been summoned to the Foreign Office to answer questions over the escalating threats from Paris. Talking earlier to GB News, the Environment Secretary George Eustace did not rule out involving Navy vessels if needed.
We think in the first instance that using diplomatic channels is the right thing to do. And of course, France, as an EU member, doesn't decide its own fishing policy. That's set by the EU, and the EU represent France internationally when it comes to fisheries. So we're raising it with the European Commission, since they've got a role in making sure France abides by the law and abides by the terms of the agreement. But we're also raising it diplomatically, and we think that is the right thing to do in the first instance. But obviously, if France carries through the threats that they've made, and they've suggested they might be doing this from Tuesday, were they to do that, then obviously we reserve our options to, to respond in a proportionate way in kind.
But are we likely to see Navy involvement? I'm joined by retired Admiral of the Royal Navy and former Security Minister Lord West of Spithead. Now, welcome to the programme. Why are Navy ships put on high readiness? Why are the ships put on high readiness?
Well, I mean, there are always ships available to do fishery protection. There's a fishery protection squadron, and their job is to look after our fishing boats and to enforce our fishery rules, and that's what they're for. And so, with this incident escalating at the moment, it's quite appropriate that we should have some of that squadron available in the Channel to either enforce rules or to protect our fishing boats or to do whatever. That's the job of the Royal Navy.
There is obviously a fear that this could escalate. But if it was escalating into something more sinister, what in your mind would that be?
Well, I mean, I think it's extraordinary that the French have reacted in the way they have. As I understand it, there is a bit of a dispute about how many licences should be given to certain French fishermen, but it does seem to me that they are not really accepting the fact that there are new rules now that Brexit has happened. And certainly a large number of EU fishing vessels have been given rights to fish in British waters, but these are now British waters. And the fact that some haven't been because they haven't proved that they fished in those waters in the past is just extremely unfortunate, but it's one of those things. And to overreact by threatening to do all sorts of things, I find quite extraordinary. Maybe it's to do with President Macron's election coming up next year. But, threatening to cut power to the island of Jersey. There's talk possibly of a blockade of the harbour there. Indeed, the arrest of one of our fishing vessels, I find that fascinating. Did that fishing vessel have a right to fish there? We should be able to prove that quite easily, looking at the documentation, instead of it escalating in rhetoric and people taking rather stupid actions.
So what do you think that the UK should do next? We've already got the Navy primed and ready. If the French persist with this and continue to say, for example, they would cut off power as they've been threatening to do, what do you think the reaction would be to something like that?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is that all of these sorts of things should be sorted out through negotiation. And it would be quite extraordinary, I believe, for the French to, for example, try and cut power to the island of Jersey. there must be some agreement for how much power they supply. And I'd have thought we deal straight with the EU, and the EU should take France to task about how they're behaving. The EU are responsible for actions with other countries, for those nations within the EU. And I think we ought to utilise that methodology. But, I mean, if France do things like cutting the power, start blockading ports, arresting fishing boats, any nation has a right to protect its assets and do what is necessary. And it would be a stupid thing for France to do, because inevitably there'd be an escalation. I would hope that the EU, that Brussels would say to France, come on, this is just a nonsense. You know, Britain has left the EU, and now the situation has changed. Those waters now are British waters, they're not EU waters, and the rules are imposed on those. I mean, by 2026, we could say not a single French fishing boat is allowed in any of our territorial waters and our territorial seas. I mean, maybe that would give them quite a shock, really, if that happened. But we don't want to go down this sort of route. It's madness, and you get escalation. And if you find ships confronting each other, something silly happens, someone will get killed, and it gets worse and worse.
Well, listen, Lord Alan West, thank you so much for joining us. He's a retired Admiral of the Royal Navy and former Security Minister. Right, I'm going to quickly ask the panel. Wow. Abby, what do you think of this? I mean, we are...
Wow. Mon Dieu! Quelle horreur, as the French would say, you know. But, sorry, I slipped into my French accent. But I think this is the consequence of Boris Johnson not going for a hard enough, tough enough Brexit.
Do you think they've offered licences? That was perfectly reasonable.
But do you remember when the Brexit... Because Boris Johnson was so keen to get into power, he thought, quick, let's just do the deal. What's happening now is the chickens are coming home to roost, with or without their heads, because Boris Johnson didn't go, no, these are our waters, back off. And, of course, this is where we are now.
I largely agree with you, although you've got to remember all the messing about by Theresa May would have had a terrible deal. Brexit in name only. We've almost got that now, which is why we've got the problem with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now's the time for tough leadership, because the French are taking advantage. We need to tell them simply, it's our fishing waters, we're not having this. Release our captain now. I mean, I'd go further. I'd now invade Calais. We should take Calais back like we had it in the Middle Ages.
Well,
then
I don't know whether
listen to my mad idea. Yeah. We could then process all those people who are getting in the dinghies. And what I love about the French...
that's right. Process them properly to come to the UK rather than letting them take the risk.
But it's kind of half a joke, what I'm saying. But how come the French can arrest our boats but can't stop the people leaving in the dinghies to come here?
Because
that's the question.
You know what my theory is? This is revenge for us having left the European Union.
Or really. Macron trying to sort of flex his muscles a bit to make himself look a bit more
but actually,
in control.
I think actually he's in danger of not winning the next election. Very much. There's a guy, who's the guy that is very, very close.
Well, you could also give it over to Le Pen, perhaps, the way it's going.
But what about the EU, though? Because the EU are supposed to be... I mean, as the Lord Admiral said... that the EU should actually be taking control of the situation and telling France, no, you can't behave like that.
The EU was useless as a chocolate fireguard when we were in it. They're not going to necessarily help us now, are they? That's the problem. And we've got to be firm. Lord West is right when he says, let's get our boats there. If another person's taken, we must then intervene. Well, I don't mean shoot them out.
No, but something needs to be done.
We need to, get on those boats and say, we're not doing this.
Because we just weren't tough enough. Sorry, I mean, Theresa May was useless, and then Boris Johnson just wasn't.
I don't know whether it's...
We kind of shrugged our shoulders a bit. We did this, the Gallic shrug.
But sometimes you have to negotiate and have a nice balance and move and back out of things gradually.
But the problem is that's how we do things, but the French do things very differently. We can't keep.
But what we did was, but your point was that it was about the negotiation. I'm saying that actually I didn't think that was a bad move to do it gradually.
But do you remember?
But the point of it is
Nigel Farage warned that this was coming down the line about the fisheries.
Well, we'll see. This story will obviously run, and we'll be following it very closely. Now, after the break, a quarter of UK adults are suffering from high blood pressure, the biggest risk factor for strokes. And today is Stroke Awareness Day, and we'll be speaking to Dr. Sarah Jarvis to find out the signs to look out for and what we can do to improve our health. But first, here's the latest news headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. Here are the latest headlines. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence. Prosecutors say the boat's captain has been summoned to appear in court next August. US President Joe Biden has met Pope Francis at the Vatican. During talks that lasted more than an hour, they discussed the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change and poverty. President Biden will head to the G20 summit in Rome this weekend before travelling to Glasgow for COP26. A serving Met police officer has been charged with child sex offences. 51-year-old Detective Constable Francois Alwage was arrested at an address in Basingstoke. He's facing 4 charges, including attempting to meet a girl under 16 years of age. The Scottish Government is providing £41 million to help families with their winter bills. The cash will be made available for those on low incomes who are struggling to pay for energy. The Prime Minister has lent his support to the Royal British Legion Centenary Appeal ahead of its 100th year raising funds for veterans. Boris Johnson bought a poppy on the steps of 10 Downing Street before urging everyone to buy a remembrance symbol. Well, I'll be back at the top of the hour with a full news update. Bye for now.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. Now today is World Stroke Day and an opportunity to raise awareness of the signs to look out for. Now, according to the latest data from Public Health England, 1 in 4 UK adults are more vulnerable to a stroke due to high blood pressure. Well, I'm pleased to say that Dr. Sarah Jarvis joins me now to discuss this further. Dr. Sarah Jarvis, welcome to the programme. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be with you.
Now, I want to ask you, why is blood pressure, high blood pressure, such a sort of big indicator for stroke?
Well, the problem we've got is that when your blood pressure is raised, firstly, you don't know about it. Virtually nobody has any idea that they have high blood pressure unless they've had it measured in the short term. But of course, the problem is what happens in the longer term is if you think about your circulation in your pipes, if the pressure inside your pipes in your home goes up too much, or if things, for instance, expand when pipes have frozen and opened up again and the water expands, then what happens? They burst. Exactly the same thing is happening here. here. So particularly as far as stroke is concerned, which is in about 85% of cases or 80% of cases caused by a clot inside the brain, the single biggest risk factor for stroke is high blood pressure. And the problem we've got is that, as you say, 1 in 4 people have probably got it, but at least 5.5, 6 million people don't know that, and they're not being treated.
Right. So are there any kind of signs that could indicate that you have high blood pressure?
No, that's part of the problem, basically. Unless your blood pressure is absolutely exceptionally high, you don't know it. And that's why I'm working with Omron Healthcare and the International Society for Hypertension, who are trying to get more people to get their blood pressure measured. And what you can do is there's 2 ways that you can do it. Obviously, if you're not going to know unless you get it measured, you need to get it measured. There are 2 ways that you can do it. The first is that you can take your own measurements at home, and it's very easy to do that. There are lots of really high quality devices which are very, very inexpensive these days. And I recommend, every GP I know recommends that their patients with high blood pressure keep one of these devices, these so-called blood pressure monitors or sphygmomanometers at home. They're very easy. They're all digital. They do it all for you and measure their blood pressure regularly. Or if you're over 40 and you're not having treatment for high blood pressure, you can pop in and a pharmacist can do it for you, although they'll only do 1 measurement for you. And actually, in order to diagnose hypertension or indeed to monitor high blood pressure, we need to have regular measurements. So we recommend, for instance, that you do 4 days worth of measurements, 2 in the morning, 2 at night, while you're at rest. Discard the first day's readings, add the other 12 together and divide by 12 to get an average, and that'll tell you what your blood pressure is.
I see. Are there any foods that you can eat to sort of help with your blood pressure? Because I heard things like beetroot, things high in nitrates could help.
So the really important thing, the single most important modifiable risk factor, according to Public Health England, for high blood pressure is reducing your salt intake.
Right.
As a nation, we eat about 8.2 grams a day of salt, whereas we shouldn't be eating more than about 6 grams. That's about a teaspoon of salt from all sources. And part of the problem is that about 3/4 of the salt we eat comes from areas that we don't know about. It's not mostly salt we add to our food. It's salt that is in pre-prepared foods.
I see. Yeah, you're better off sort of cooking your own food, putting your own salt in and knowing exactly how much salt is in there, frankly. I'm wondering if people actually understand then, if there is somebody around you who is having a stroke, what are the signs then to look out for? Because you may not realise it's a stroke. So I remember there used to be this advert on TV that would warn you of some of the signs. Yeah,
absolutely. So it really is as simple as fast. So F is for face, if one side of the face is drooping. A is for arm or leg. On one side, weakness, you put your arm up, you can't hold it up or you can't walk properly. S is for speech. So either slurred speech or not being able to get the words out. You know what you want to say, but you can't get them out. And the T of fast is, that means it's time to call 999, because stroke is absolutely every bit as much of an emergency as a heart attack. We call it a brain attack these days, because if you can get into hospital, have a scan to make sure that it's been caused by a clot rather than a bleed, if you do that in a short enough space of time, there is a very small window of opportunity, just a few hours, and you can either have medication which helps dissolve the clot and restores the circulation, or in some cases, you can have surgery to remove the clot, and both of those really can dramatically reduce the disability from stroke.
And stroke could never, if it was happening, could never heal itself and stop, because I hear people have mini strokes that they weren't aware of. Is that...
So it's a really good point. Now, I don't like the term mini stroke because it makes it sound it's only of mini importance. In fact, what's commonly called a mini stroke is what's called a TIA, or a transient ischemic attack. And by definition, it's got the same symptoms as a stroke, although they may be fairly mild by comparison. So you just get a little bit of drooping or a little bit of confusion, that sort of thing. But they resolve by themselves within 24 hours. Now, I have a lot of patients who go, well, it's gone now, I don't need to worry. Yet you really, really do. If you've had a TIA, you're at much, much higher risk of having a stroke in the future. So it's essential that even if the symptoms go away, you do consult with your doctor, you explain what the symptoms are, and then they can advise you. They can do tests, including your cholesterol, checking your blood pressure, putting you on medication to lower it, all sorts of other things that will reduce your chance of going on to get a stroke. So in some respects, a TIA, sometimes called a mini stroke, can be, quote, a good thing if it spurs you into action.
it's a warning, and I suppose having a blood pressure monitor as well and monitoring your blood pressure every single day is probably a good shout as well. Dr. Sarah Jarvis, thank you so much.
What you can do, I was just going to say, if you want, what you can do is go onto maymeasure.org and just put in 3 measurements onto the May measurement MMM at home, and they will tell you what to do. They'll tell you if it's high and what action to take.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah Jarvis, GP, and amazing, isn't it? All the things about strokes where we don't even realise that these things are going on, and then just to monitor your blood pressure. I actually do mine every single day as well. Listen, still to come after the break with COP26 in Glasgow, just days away. I'll be speaking to the man tasked with transporting visitors around the city throughout the conference. He's doing it with an all-electric bus fleet, but is electric public transport really the future? First, let's take a look at the weather.
We have further weather warnings in force right the way through the weekend and into the start of next week. More heavy rain in the forecast on top of the already saturated ground from the last few days. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, a big area of low pressure in the Atlantic sweeping various weather fronts right the way across the country. And there's more of that to come. In fact, the next one already waiting in the wings. This will bring another band of rain our way, heading in from the west through the course of this evening and overnight. And again, there will be some very heavy downpours associated with that band of rain. Either side, there will be some drier conditions, but with quite a lot of cloud associated with that band of rain, it won't be a particularly cold night for most of us. So Saturday starts on a wet note across western parts of the UK, and that band of rain will continue to trundle its way eastwards. It is actually moving slightly more quickly than some of the previous weather fronts have over the last few days, which is good news. And there are better conditions following on behind. So through Saturday afternoon and into the evening, drier conditions arrive from the west. Always the chance of a blustery shower, but some drier spells in between. And that's the case as we move through Saturday night. A lot of dry weather around, a few showers popping up here and there, especially across western parts of the country. And then yet another band of rain starts to edge in from the Atlantic. And this one will be with us first thing on Sunday morning. So it's a repeat performance for Sunday. Again, a wet start to the day for many of us, especially across western parts of the country. That rain, again, with some heavy downpours associated with it, gradually begins to track its way east and northwards, with some clearer conditions following on behind, which is good news if you're heading out trick-or-treating. Dry weather for some of us, but it remains unsettled into next week.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To the Point.
So Glasgow is just days away from welcoming thousands of people to the climate conference COP26, most of who flew there in private jets. Eyebrows have been raised over the carbon footprint the city would leave transporting all the attendees around it. But one business has made a huge investment in electric, buying over 50 electric buses to use throughout the conference and beyond. So joining me now is the CEO, McGill's Ralph Roberts. Ralph, welcome to the programme. Why did you make the decision to go electric?
Thank you and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Listen, bus is quite a small part of overall transport emissions. Transport is 27% of pollution. Bus is less than 5% of transport emissions. So it's quite a small portion. But each bus still burns 30,000 litres of diesel a year. And that's a big impact in anyone's language. So we felt that we really needed to lead by example. And to get to zero, it's either electric bus or hydrogen. And at this point in time, battery is the clear technological leader. So that's the direction that we went in. Placed an order for 68 zero-emission battery buses, and they're all into the fleet now.
But do you remember Betamax video recorders? Because I'm old enough to remember them. I'm concerned that electric might be the Betamax and you should have gone hydrogen. Are you worried about that?
Well, listen, Betamax was actually a better solution. I do remember it. I had one of each. A lot of people did for a while. But they're here now. They're working now. We're delivering over 200,000 passenger journeys a week on our battery buses, and they're working very well. The customers like them. The maintenance teams and the drivers love them. So they're doing the job, Betamax or VHS.
Are they saving you money? Are you finding that is one of the things about them?
They're more expensive initially, I'm afraid, but over 15 years they should be broadly the same. There's been government assistance with this in terms of the capital money, but over 15 years it should be broadly the same as a diesel bus, and that's important. Keep fares low.
Do you think we can actually reach the net zero by 2050?
Well, it depends where you are in the country. It's a big target. People are going to have to change their behaviours. It would make a huge difference if each motorist made one journey a month by public transport, whether that's bus or train or tram or whatever's available. If you could make one journey per month, that would make a massive difference, and it would actually help get those embedded behaviours changed.
Yeah, and you're transporting people then from wherever it is they're staying to the actual conference and stuff. That's the plan, is it, of these buses?
Well, the buses are in revenue earning service, so there's no contracts involved, and they are delivering journeys all around the exhibition centre where the COP26 event is taking place. So the delegates for the conference have got smart passes, a bit like Oyster in London, and they can get on every bus, and we're, like I say, delivering 200,000 journeys per week around there, and these delegates will be getting on and off these zero-emission buses.
That's great. Well, that sounds fabulous. Let's stay right where you are. I'm going to bring in Stephen Mearsman. He's the founder and director of Zeno, a company working to build 3 fully electric depots across Scotland. Welcome to the programme. I want to ask you, do you think, Stephen, electric is actually realistic and actually a viable proposition?
I think it's not only viable, I think we can do it much earlier than 2050 with the right policies and support in place. And we've seen private operators like McGill's already take the leap, and not just in 2s or 5s, but with meaningful amounts of their fleet. Because as you go larger with electric, there are more learnings and more savings to be had, be it from operation, not burning fuel, or less spares as they break down less. So yes, I think it's not only viable, it's also advisable.
What about the fact that the wholesale prices of electricity are going up horrendously, and also that a lot of the electricity is coming from fossil fuel? Does that bother you?
Well, I'd say obviously we need to clean up the grid, but what we shouldn't forget is that with a diesel or a petrol car, the maximum efficiency you can get is about 30%, while on the grid that's obviously a lot higher. And actually in the UK, we do benefit from a very green grid already. We run on a lot of wind and solar, and that's only expected to increase. The other part, I would say, on the energy side is that actually these vehicles can be the start of a virtuous circle by reusing the batteries from the vehicle later on in a secondary life to further green the grid.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm going to ask, come back to Ralph and ask you, Ralph, COP26, it's happening in Glasgow. How important is it for Glasgow to stage this event?
Well, they're saying that it's the biggest event that's ever been held in the UK. I mean, that's quite a statement. There's been a lot of big events, from Olympics and Commonwealth Games plus others. Just to touch on that element about the grid in Scotland is actually very green. 88% in 2019 was delivered by renewables, and we believe that in 2020, which was not a normal year because of the pandemic, but it was over 92% of electricity consumed was delivered by renewable sources. So in Scotland, at least, it is a very green source, which caused us to go there. If you look at other places in the world that have held the COP events, think about Denmark, for example. It's always been a bit of a springboard. There's always been a legacy after the COP events in terms of righteous behaviour for the environment. And if you look at what's happened with cycling and active travel in Copenhagen after the COP event, I think it was COP 15 or 14, you know, it's every bit, you know, they're cycling as much in Denmark now as they were in Holland or as they are in Holland. So there's always a bit of a legacy. And because I'm from Glasgow, I'm hoping there is a legacy post-COP26 in terms of people's behaviour.
Well, that would be great, actually, wouldn't it? But I think they might need to clear up those rats. Apparently, they've got lots of rats there as well, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us. And you, Ralph, as well. It's been a pleasure. Wow. Yes, let's bring in the panel, talking about electric public transport. Well, maybe they could electrify some of the rats. But no, I'm only joking. I'm joking, of course not. You wouldn't do that to rats. That's horrible. That's horrible. I'm joking. That's a joke. But there seems to be... I mean, look, it's great, isn't it? There could be a legacy. He's talking about a legacy.
I think the idea of electric public transport in city centres is a great one. I mean, you're probably not old enough, Nana, to remember trolley buses.
Very sweet of you.
Trolley buses, which worked on electric wires. They had them in towns like Hull, they had them in London, they had them in Coventry. You know, we got rid of all that, just like we got rid of the train infrastructure with Beeching. Now, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I just think city centres, I think they could all be electric or probably hydrogen, as you were saying. You really did rain on his parade, didn't you?
Well, with the rats at the end.
He just bought 70 blooming buses, and you all said, not think it'll be a little bit like Betamax.
Well, he actually had told that he had Betamax and VHS as well. Which
but his comeback was good, because Betamax was a more efficient system than VHS. But in the end, was it Pioneer or Sony? They decided people didn't care about the quality, and that's why VHS beat Betamax. But Betamax was better.
Well, it's a bit.
I've gone to sleep.
Well, it's a bit like George Stephenson and Isambard Kingdom Brunel, isn't it? I mean, Isambard Kingdom Brunel was the wider gauge for the railways. George Stephenson was the smaller. Actually, the wider range gauge was better, but because they built tunnels and things like that, they realised that they'd have to use the smaller one to
going electric. Undoubtedly, in city centres, is a good idea.
I tell you. Oh, sorry, Diane. I tell you where else cycles. China. They cycle as well, not as Denmark.
Oh, not again.
Yes, I'm going to say it because the parallels are just... I can't believe people can't see this coming. OK, a few things. China cycles. What are they going to do with the batteries? In these, you know, where these batteries things, how are they going to dispose of those? Terrible for pollution. And thirdly, what happens if, and there are growing voices who used to be in NASA and the IPCC who say we're not factoring in the sun's activity, we may be going into a cooling period, not a warming period.
See, this is what I'm saying. We've changed things and we don't realise the potential impact on how things can change. And that's the problem. We put things in place, we're going to do this, do this. It'll come in 2050. 2050, that's like for 30 years. The environment, what we need and the way things could have changed.
We could be in an ice age.
Also, this COP thing, you know, China's not going. Yeah. What's the point of it?
What is the
Even
point
the
of it?
Queen
It's
has
a good
decided
question,
she's poorly
Neil.
and taken to her bed.
Well, listen, you're watching me,
Oh,
Nana
I
Quinn.
will.
This is GB News. More to come in the next hour.
Ma'am.
I'm Nana Akua, and for this hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. The show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it is yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we'll be disagreeing, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is comedian Abby Roberts and also writer and commentator John Gaunt. Now, still to come, each Friday at 5, we'll put the spotlight on a particular guest or a subject matter in my feature Friday Focus. And this week, we're discussing the cladding crisis. 4 years on from the Grenfell Tower fire, thousands of people are still living in homes with unsafe cladding. Well, this week in the budget, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced a £5 billion grant to pay to remove unsafe cladding from the high-risk buildings in the country. I'll be joined by a resident who's living in fear. For our big debate this hour, I'm asking, should smokers have to pay an NHS levy? The latest idea to stop us smoking is offering e-cigarettes as a prescription on the NHS. We'll be discussing that. And, of course, I want to hear from you. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not tweet me at gbnews. Now, before we get into the debates, though, let's get the latest news headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. This is your news at 5 o'clock. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel that was detained for not having a licence. French prosecutors have summoned the boat's captain to appear in court next August. The Environment Secretary, George Eustace, told GB News Navy vessels will be used if needed.
We want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this. But we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
A retired accountant who stabbed her husband 3 times and left him for dead has been found guilty of murder. Penelope Jackson knifed her husband of 24 years at their home in Somerset in February this year. Jackson had denied murder, instead pleading guilty to manslaughter, with claims that she lost control after years of physical and emotional abuse by her husband. But Jackson was found guilty of murder at Bristol Crown Court after nearly 11 hours of deliberations. The Prime Minister has told China's president that world leaders must do more to tackle the climate crisis. The extensive conversation took place as Greta Thunberg joined a rally in London to protest against the use of fossil fuels. During talks with President Xi Jinping, Boris Johnson stressed that all countries must take concrete action to cut emissions and to speed up their transition to renewable energy. The Chinese president has confirmed he'll attend COP26 in Glasgow via video link. The US president has held what's been described as an unusually long meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican. Officials said the private meeting, which addressed the pandemic, climate change and poverty, lasted an hour and 15 minutes. Joe Biden, who's in Europe for the G20 summit, as well as COP26, has left a fraught domestic agenda in limbo back at home. His fellow Democrats have abandoned plans to vote for the president's nearly $3 trillion spending plan. The Scottish Government is providing £41 million to help families with their winter bills. The cash will be made available for those on low incomes who are struggling to pay for energy. It'll also help those at risk of homelessness. £6 million from the pot will go to charities that work with families in need. Coronavirus restrictions in Wales will be strengthened in a bid to curb infections, which are the highest in the UK. First Minister Mark Drakeford is reintroducing some measures, including guidance around self-isolation. Adults and young people aged 5 to 17 will soon be asked to isolate until they receive a negative PCR test. That's if someone in their household has symptoms or tests positive. COVID passes will also be extended to theatres, cinemas and concert halls. MPs are warning the Crossrail project is facing a £150 million funding gap. The Commons Public Accounts Committee expressed doubts over how and when taxpayer loans will be repaid. That's after the collapse in fares revenue due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's predicted that the cost of finishing the project is now at £18.9 billion. The Mayor of London has received his booster COVID vaccination and winter flu jab. Sadiq Khan says he hopes the move will encourage others to do the same ahead of winter. He also thanked the Health Secretary for the continued rollout of free vaccinations, adding that if he can get double jabbed, anyone can.
Well, I want to make sure everyone notes I was a very brave boy. If I didn't grimace, then anybody can do it. If I can take it, anybody can do it. And I took both jabs, the flu jab and the COVID vaccine, and I'm a wimp. So if I can do it, so can you.
Well, I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour's time. Until then, it's back to Nana Akua.
It's just gone 5 after 5. I'm Nana Akua. Let's start this hour by turning our attention to the cladding crisis. Now, it's 4 years since the Grenfell Tower fire, which led to the deaths of 72 people. And since then, tens of thousands of properties have been deemed unsafe, with the government insisting cladding needs removing. But property managers working on behalf of freeholders are telling leaseholders that people living in the homes, they must foot the bill. Now, in this week's autumn budget, the Chancellor pledged an extra £5 billion to remove unsafe cladding from the most high-risk buildings. But is it really enough to put a stop to the scandal and convince leaseholders that they won't have to foot the bill? Well, I'm joined by Charlotte, a leaseholder whose building has flammable cladding and combustible insulation. Charlotte, welcome to the programme. Thank you so much for joining me. So, first of all, let's start by telling me a little bit about your situation. So, is this a new build that you bought? Tell me a bit more.
Yeah, so I purchased the lease on my flat 5 years ago. We've since found in the last year that we have flammable cladding, combustible insulation, and in several areas we have missing cavity barriers as well. So the development itself is around 10 years old.
Right. So you said that you bought the lease, though. So you actually bought the lease?
Yes, so we own the lease, which essentially is basically a long-term rental agreement for us to live within the means of the property. We actually don't own the exterior of the building, so we don't own any of the building itself, so on the outside.
So if you don't own the outside of it, it seems a bit cheap to expect you to pay for something that covers the outside of it. Because I'm listening to that and thinking, well, if you don't own the outside of it, why does it fall for you? Surely it should be the person who owns the land or actually the company who put the properties up in the first place.
I completely agree, yes. I mean, we bought our home thinking that it was safe. We had all the relevant checks done at the time. We feel like we've been completely missold. We didn't have any part in building the development, have a choice in what materials went on the building. So, yeah, to ask leaseholders to foot the bill for a problem that is completely not our fault is, really, really unjust.
And how much are they expecting you to come up with to pay for this?
So, at the moment, we haven't got a bill for our remediation. We know what the issues are, and we expect the bill to repair and to remediate those issues will be substantial, just based on other developments that have had bills for similar types of work that's going to be required. I mean, we're seeing bills from anywhere from like £10,000 to £200,000, and it's money that people, simply normal, hardworking people, cannot afford to come up with.
Well, it's disgusting, really. You shouldn't have to pay for that at all. I mean, if somebody sells you a car and they find out inherently there's a problem with the car, then what would happen in that instance is that car would be recalled and the manufacturer would be required to fix it.
Exactly. I've actually got more rights for an oven that I bought than I have for my leasehold flat, yeah.
And for you, did you at any point think that your building was surrounded by anything that was flammable? Because when Grenfell went up, we were all discussing flammable cladding and everything else like that.
Well, it first came to light for our development in particular in about 2019 when a neighbour of mine tried to sell their property and couldn't track down the relevant documentation to be able to provide a mortgage lender with to say that the building was safe. That's when the suspicions were arisen about the safety of the development, and it's since been in the last, like I say, 12 months since we've had some surveys done come to light that we've got quite severe issues.
So you didn't realise at all until only 12 months ago. So what about remortgaging? Because you probably, I don't know whether you're on a fixed rate mortgage, that comes to an end, then you'll be stuck on a standard variable, I presume.
Yeah, we haven't got to that stage yet, for me personally, but yeah, based on other experiences, we're very much expecting that to be an issue.
So you won't be able to remortgage, so you'd have to go onto the standard variable, whatever their rate is, so you're sort of stuck there.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't be able to sell.
We can't sell. The value of our flat is zero, so we're completely trapped. Obviously, there's extreme fear about the fact that you're living in a flammable building and you can't protect yourself from that. And then there's this fear that eventually you're going to get the remediation costs through as well. And in the development that I'm in, I'm actually in a block under 18 metres, so I'm completely ineligible for any government funding as well. So the entire bill I will need to foot.
So I thought it was for over 18 metres that they weren't going to fund.
No, over is what they...
So they will fund that, but anything under they won't fund?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to point out that all they will fund is removal of cladding. So all of the other issues that have come to light since having these surveys done since the Grenfell Tower fire, they won't pay to remediate those. So even though leaseholders might get some funding, it won't cover all of the issues necessarily. So that's quite an important point as well.
So where are the developers then? Because they built it, by the sounds of it, they probably would have known that what they put in there wasn't quite right. How did it, where are the developers? Have you written to them? Where do they fit in this?
Yeah, so the developers were approached in 2019 when, like I say, when we had a neighbour that was trying to sell their property and they were trying to track down certain documentation. Since we've tried to engage with them through the freeholder of our development as well, we don't hear from them. I've heard from them directly through my MP, but at the moment there's been no direct correspondence to talk to leaseholders in their affected development to see, what the issues are, how we're all feeling. I mean, we put our faith in them when we purchased our flat, and it feels like we've just been left out to dry.
Well, it looks like, by the sounds of it, they've cut corners, and those corners have made the building something that isn't actually that safe to live in. But they're not alone, because lots of others are doing the same and getting away with it, because these buildings, they come up with the NHBC guarantee as well, don't they?
That's right, yeah. So I think, regulations have been such that they've allowed the industry to, like you say, cut corners, maybe not meet regulations as well. So we're in a situation where the regulations have been like that. They've allowed the industry to profit hugely, and the Grenfell Tower fire has exposed all of the problems that have been created by these developers and polluters. I mean, there's many parties involved in this issue. The only party that is innocent is the leaseholder, yet they're being made to pay.
And I suppose in a way it's kind of retrospective, isn't it? Because the fire has happened now. They're going back and looking at things and now trying to apply something that may not have applied at the time when those flats were purchased. But it sounds like even there they still cut corners. It does sound...
Yeah, and I think that also there's not really been any proper risk assessment done. There's been a one-size-fits-all policy across entire developments across the country. There's not been the appropriate risk assessment to see what buildings are most at risk, and to then actually, remediate those buildings and look at funding for the entire portfolio of issues. It's not thought through and not adequate.
Well, I'm going to read this statement from Bellway because they're the builders and they're the ones who put this thing together. Bellway Homes built Charlotte's... This is what they said. Bellway Homes built Charlotte's home. They said, Bellway takes fire safety of our developments extremely seriously, and we have invested significant resources into tackling fire and building safety issues head-on. We fully appreciate at the heart of the issue is the need to ensure leaseholders and residents feel safe in their homes, which is why, since 2017, Bellway have committed £164.7 million to make fire safety improvements where we are responsible, or to put in place interim fire safety measures at no cost to the leaseholders. Bellway received a formal communication from the managing agent in August 2021. We are still in the process of reviewing this information and previous surveys that have been carried out. Right, so that's what they're saying. August 2021. Have you spoken to them since then?
Not since then, no,
Right.
but I know the communication that they're referring to, but I would say that they've definitely been aware of our building since prior to that. I would really welcome Bellway to come and talk to us and have a conversation. I would really like a meeting to discuss, because those figures, we know that those figures are not adequate enough. Developers are simply getting away with a slap on the wrist, and that being that. So I've not seen I've not had a conversation about any of those funds that have been put aside for fire remediation, and they know that our building is unsafe. So, yeah, I would welcome a conversation about that.
So what's next then? So you're waiting. We've got to get a conversation with these people. In the meantime, what are you having to put anything forward or pay anything or do anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're paying for interim fire safety measures as it stands. So we have a waiting watch. So we've got a bill that's coming up to £400,000 for our development. So we are paying, and I think from my point of view, I want the government to legislate against the polluter. I want them to make it so that we are not that they protect the innocent here, because at the moment the guilty are getting off scot-free, and I think it's really important to say that the amount that the $5 billion that was mentioned in the budget this week is not additional. That's $5 billion total. That includes the $2 billion levy that they are getting from developers across a decade. It's quite simply pennies from this industry, and it's not good enough. And we need to see proper legislation now.
Well, listen, Charlotte, I really wish you the best on this one, and I'm fully with you. I think it's absolutely abhorrent that they would expect you to pay for something when they haven't built it properly in the first instance. Thank you so much, Charlotte.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. Well, I'm pleased to say that I'm also joined by Labour Councillor for Central Liverpool, Nick Small. Nick, welcome to the programme. You represent thousands of leaseholders impacted by the cladding crisis. What are they telling you?
Well, I'm literally dealing with scores of blocks in Liverpool that are affected by this. I'm a leaseholder myself. There's hundreds and thousands of people that I'm working with who are affected by this. They're saying to me that this is a drop in the ocean. It's too little, too late. 5 billion is, it's not enough to solve this when the true cost is estimated between 15 billion and 50 billion. So this is the true cost of dealing with this across the country. It's a drop in the ocean, and it's not going to solve the problem.
This is what Charlotte was saying as well, and it does seem a bit of a nonsense to expect people who live in these properties to actually pay for something that was clearly not put in properly by the developer in the first instance. What are you wanting the government to do then about this?
Well, I think the government needs to step up and ensure that leaseholders don't have to pay any money towards this. It is completely unfair that leaseholders are having to foot the bill for this. I think the proposal around the levy is good insofar as it brings in some money from house builders, but it only brings in money from house builders who are around today. And this is a legacy issue. There are lots of developers who simply the company doesn't exist anymore and we maybe developed something 5, 10, 20 years ago, they're not around to pay this. It's going to be those large developers who are around today. It also doesn't cover anything like the full cost of dealing with this. And as Charlotte said before, and sadly many people are going to find themselves in the same position that Charlotte's in, the 18-metre limit is a completely arbitrary one, and those who are in blocks under 18 metres are going to get no help whatsoever. It also doesn't give any help. It gives some help towards the capital costs of remediating this, but it doesn't give any help towards the increased service charges that people are currently going to be paying. Where I live, our service charge has gone up by about 4 times the amount it was 2 years ago. We're having to pay that for things like Wake and Watch, for fire alarm systems, to sort out the issues that we face now. There's next to no help from government or from the industry to support some of that. So it is a complete mess that people are finding themselves in through no fault of their own. People are becoming mortgage prisoners. They can't move, they can't sell the houses, they can't sell the flats, they can't remortgage. They're stuck where they are with an asset that's worth nothing. And the mental health consequences of this, people are facing bankruptcy, people are facing all kinds of worries about it. The mental health consequences of this are just astonishing. And people are having to face this with next to no support from government.
It just seems absolutely shocking, and something has to be done, and it has to be done soon. And Nick, thank you so much for joining me. That's Nick Sport.
Thank you.
He's a councillor at Central Liverpool. Now, we asked the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities about the issue of leaseholders looking at footing the bill, and this is what they said. It is unacceptable and unfair that leaseholders are facing excessive bills. Building owners and industry must make buildings safe without passing on costs to leaseholders. The new Secretary of State is looking afresh at this issue to make sure that everything is being done to protect and support leaseholders, and further details will be set out in due course. Right, so coming up, it's our big debate this hour. Today I'm asking, should smokers have to pay an NHS levy? It's after news that e-cigarettes could be prescribed by the Health Service to help smokers quit. We'll be back in a moment.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
So it is time for our big debate this hour. Should smokers have to pay an NHS levy? People could be prescribed with e-cigarettes on the NHS to help them stop using tobacco products. If it goes ahead, England would be the first country in the world to introduce the smoking alternatives as a medical product. But Are they just the lesser of the two evils? I'm joined by Dr. Catherine Millington Sanders, a GP in Kingston, to talk about this further. Hello, welcome to the programme. I love those glasses, by the way. They're rather nice. I want to ask you, how effective do you think that prescribing e-cigarettes would be to help people actually quit smoking?
Well, thank you in the first place. It's such an important subject, and this month is Stoptober, which is fantastic. So if we cover maybe, first of all, some of the health effects of smoking and some of the reasons that e-cigarettes and other nicotine replacement therapies are really important, is that currently in the UK about 1 in 7 people smoke, and there's more men than women, and that's about 6.9 million people across the UK. So half of smokers will die early, and an average cigarette smoker will die about 10 years younger than non-smokers. It's the biggest cause of cancer. It causes problems with fertility in both men and women, early menopause, impotence and sort of reduced sexual function in men. Pregnant women's health is really important and is affected, and also it can increase the risk of miscarriage, premature births, stillbirths, and also sudden infant death syndrome for mothers who are also smoking. It doesn't just affect your physical health, but it really affects your mental health as well. And quitting can improve your mood and help relieve stress and anxiety and depression. People who are stopping smoking, literally after hours and days, you can notice a really big difference. So you can have improved smell, taste, you can notice that your heart rate is returning to normal, and your muscles and your heart start working better, and your breathing process improves. And after a year of stopping smoking, your risk of a heart attack will have completely halved compared to a smoker's. So we might all be thinking, why are we smoking in the first place? And that's important. And cigarettes with tobacco produce a mixture of things. They obviously have nicotine, which is the highly addictive substance, but they also have really harmful chemicals like tar, that's the sticky stuff that you can notice on your fingers and around sort of your lips and the staining, and also carbon monoxide, that's the stuff that cars and things, exhaust, can produce. And these really harmful chemicals cause much of the sort of harmful processes from smoking. So in order to replace the nicotine, that's this highly addictive part, we've got these nicotine replacement possibilities. And e-cigarettes are by far, and are growing by far, biggest nicotine replacement therapy. So we know that nicotine on its own is far less harmful than actually smoking cigarettes, and they say about sort of 95% less harmful. So, and it works by basically helping people reduce their nicotine cravings while cutting down, and also to help them stop smoking. So there are about 3.6 million users of e-cigarettes around the country, and the majority are actually ex-smokers, and about 1 in 3 people are dual smokers. Those are the people that also are smoking cigarettes. And the main thrust is basically...
Catherine, can I ask you, though, so do you think, though, that if people could get this on prescription so that they could maybe stop smoking, that this is actually a good thing?
So I think the really important thing is we know the harm that smoking does. So anything that we can help adults that are smoking to actually, anyone that's smoking, is to stop smoking. And one of the main ways to help improve outcomes is to give nicotine replacement therapies. So e-cigarettes have proven to be helpful with that. So it's definitely one of our options. It's an intervention that could be very helpful. But we also have to consider the cost of smoking.
I was going to say, on prescription, though, could it not become one of those things where people would simply just get them on prescription and stop buying them, and then just be hooked on them just as they were for cigarettes? Because obviously nicotine is not without its own issues.
So I think it's a key point, but I think that will be looked at very closely. So this is not going to be without a regulatory process. Right. And there will be an evidence review with organisations like NICE that will look at how we prescribe them, when we prescribe them, if they're going to be prescribed, and under the circumstances that we would actually want to be giving out any medication. So all of our medications have to go through a strict scrutiny and regulatory process. Right. I mean, the positive parts are that we could actually make sure that some of the offers for e-cigarettes are actually properly regulated, and that the doses of nicotine are important as well.
Of course. Yeah, thank you so much. That's Dr. Catherine Millington Sanders. She's a GP discussing the safety of and of the whole issue of e-cigarettes. Let's bring it in the panel now and ask them what they think as well. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that this is a...
Well, I'm just so glad I never smoked, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried at university, but everyone smoked roll-ups. I'm not very dexterous, so I couldn't roll one up. I never really got into it, but everybody smoked. And in those days, it was roll-ups, then it was, if they had more money, Marlboro, and I can't remember what the
Silk cut, those ones as well. I used to smoke...
These were drama students.
No, tough. Or the ones...
Oh, the French ones.
Oh, the minty ones, the Gauloises, whatever.
Oh, my God.
Well, let's bring
I'm
it...
just glad I never did it, is all I can say. Thank God I didn't.
Well, I'm going to bring in Doug Mutter. He's the Compliance Director of a vape retailer, VPZ. Let's also keep my panel here as well, Abby and John. Doug, I'm going to ask you, how popular are these e-cigarettes at the moment?
Hi there, guys. Thanks for having me. Yes, e-cigarettes, vaping products are very popular because of the effectiveness they have in allowing smokers to quit. Much like our guest before spoke of, smoking is it's the nation's #1 killer, and really any drive to reduce that is a massive one. So they are very popular. They're more effective than nicotine patches and gums in successful quits. Public Health England's and ASH evidence continues to show that. So yeah, they are a very popular choice.
Abby,
yeah.
Just doing that smile as if you're going to say something.
No, I was going to say, I went cold turkey. I mean, I wasn't a heavy smoker, but I smoked on and off, and then just decided just to not smoke anymore. And I worry a little bit that the action of just kind of inhaling something, even if it is an e-cigarette, will kind of, because I know many people who've then gone back onto cigarettes. That's the problem, because basically it's the action of like sucking something in, isn't it? It's quite enjoyable.
So the motor function is certainly something that is lacking in some of the other nicotine replacement therapies that has proven to be so successful with vaping products. In terms of regress to smoking cigarettes, a lot of that is from poor experience in terms of purchasing a device quick and dirty from a petrol station, a convenience store, and not seeking the proper advice from experts to guide you through, because it is a very guided process. Not every smoker is the same. As you know, not everyone smokes the same brand of cigarettes. Not everyone smokes the same amount of cigarettes. So it is very device and liquid and, importantly, nicotine strength dependent. And if you get those factors correct at the start, as we do, we offer a vape clinic service across our network of stores that does exactly this. If you get those factors correct at the start, the success rate is massive. And then what happens is typically a smoker will come in and will start on a flavour such as tobacco or menthol because it's something they're used to. And as their body changes through the stages, as the GP explained to us as well, very quickly your taste buds come back and you start to taste things differently again and enjoy things again. And the important part is when people realise that they don't actually like the taste of cigarettes, because they are disgusting. Let's face it, the taste, the smell is disgusting. And that's where the flavour element comes in. So the quickest way to relapse is by something like a tobacco, because if your battery runs out or you run out of liquid and you can't access a product as it was hard to do through lockdown, you can easily buy a packet of cigarettes at any corner, any store, any garage and go straight back. It's an easy option.
I was going to say, when I started smoking, I hated the taste of the cigarettes, but eventually I forced myself to enjoy them because I thought I looked cool. John, what do you make of this?
Oh, I was going to ask the gentleman, how do you get them off the vape then? Because it's okay to get them on the vape, but eventually you don't want them on the vape, do you?
Well, he doesn't want to. He's got a shop, hasn't he, or something, in the vape
thing? I don't know. Well, yeah, you've got 150 shops. You don't want to get them off. But how do we get them off? Because it's not good either, is it, vaping? I mean, I was reading a report by WHO just yesterday, I think, who was saying that the dangers of vaping have not yet been fully examined. Obviously, it's better than smoking a cigarette. So how do you get people off the vapes? Otherwise, you're just substituting one habit for another.
Yes, well, to tackle the point on who, first of all, it's interesting where information comes from and where funding for who comes from. All our information is taken from Public Health England and the MHRA, the very same people that regulated our COVID vaccines and all our health issues, all our medicines throughout the country. So the evidence, the industry is 12, 15 years old. There are long-term studies. It is at least 95% safer than smoking. And what we have to remember is the person that's smoking has a 1 in 2 chance of dying. So if you can reduce that by 95%, it is good. In terms of the journey, so a lot of people do exit vaping. They stop smoking, they vape, then they exit vaping. So liquids are limited to a certain nicotine strength in the UK of 20 milligrams per mil. So people will come in, heavy smokers will come in at the top level. People smoking less, sort of 5 to 10 cigarettes a day won't. They'll come in maybe around a 12 or a 10 milligram. And there is a journey down even to 0 milligram, where they're purely doing it for the habitual and the flavour, and many do exit. But some people, nicotine in isolation, as the GP was saying, nicotine in isolation, nicotine isn't the killer. Nicotine's what's addictive in a cigarette, like caffeine's addictive in a coffee. But nicotine in isolation, away from the tar and the ash and the carbon monoxide, that's what kills people, not the nicotine.
It's not the nicotine, but the nicotine is not probably that great for you either. Thank you so much, Doug, for joining us. Interesting stuff. But the thing is, you're going from one to the other. We don't know the actual full outcome of how these vapes are, whether they'll be any good at all, and whether there's some issues about them that we don't yet know. Well, we'll get your views on the debates in just a moment. We'll also be talking about Facebook's plans for a metaverse and finding out what a virtual Zuckerberg world might look like. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. Here are the latest headlines. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel detained yesterday for not having a licence. Prosecutors say the boat's captain has been summoned to appear in court next August. A retired accountant who stabbed her husband 3 times and left him for dead has been jailed for life. Penelope Jackson will serve a minimum term of 18 years after being found guilty of murdering her husband at their home in Somerset earlier this year. Jackson had denied murder but pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming she'd lost control after years of physical and emotional abuse by her husband. The Scottish Government is providing £41 million to help families with their winter bills. The cash will be made available for those on low incomes who are struggling to pay for energy. The Prime Minister has lent his support to the Royal British Legion centenary appeal ahead of its 100th year raising funds for veterans. Boris Johnson bought a poppy on the steps of 10 Downing Street before urging everyone to buy a remembrance symbol. Well, I'll be back at 6 p.m. Now we return to Nana Akua.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. Now, this show is nothing without your views. E-cigarettes could be prescribed on the NHS for the first time to help quit traditional cigarettes. So today I'm asking whether there should be an NHS levy for smokers. You've heard what my guests and panel have to think. Now it's your turn to say, and lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Gibson says they already do. Smoking taxes generate around about £9 billion. Stephen says we all pay NHS levies in our taxes. I don't smoke, but I don't support smokers paying more. Max says, I'm no expert, but I reckon alcohol-related incidents and health issues cost billions of pounds, probably more than smokers. Don says, no, duty on cigarettes more than finances their treatment costs. Also, Doug says, well, I would say yes, but only if all duty and tax is removed from tobacco products. Otherwise, they would be paying twice for not being able to access the NHS rather than once like everyone else. And there's also a poll-up on Twitter today throughout the show asking that very question. And currently, 56% say no, and we shouldn't place a levy on the NHS for smokers. Interesting. What do you think?
What do I say? I say it's a slippery slope.
Oh, gosh.
To nick somebody's expression. If you go down charging a special levy for people who smoke, because then you say, what about alcohol? What about food? What about dangerous sports?
Well, it doesn't have to apply to everything, though. Why does it always have to apply to everything?
But the actual facts of smoking are, and if you speak to... I'm not a smoker. I hate it.
I used to smoke.
Yeah, but the amount they raise in tobacco does, as that caller, as that viewer said, far outweigh the cost to the NHS for smoking.
Yes,
that is
but the idea is that they're trying to phase it out so that they're not actually taking money from the taxes in that way in any case. So,
but speaking as a libertarian, which I didn't say earlier to this guy, I'm very worried about this penalising. What are they going to do? Tax joy next? You know what I mean? Some people enjoy smoking. It's like I worry that we are becoming this nanny state. The NHS particularly are sort of going to start to be, literally peeking through the curtains and going, oh, what are you up to in there?
Well,
and that concerns me.
But you've gone out of your way to do something that is pretty deadly for your own health. Then so
which includes drinking.
Well,
drugs,
I mean, there's all those as well, and you could go that way. But
climbing up a mountain.
But the question is, but what we're hearing is, but if you look at it, then those who smoke are getting, in a sense, slightly privileged position then, because they're given the free vape billing and all that stuff just to come off the cigarettes, and they're given that for how long I don't know. So why should they get that support? And
it's all about more education, isn't it? And certainly banning smoking in pubs, which I was against actually.
Really?
But it actually has made the environment better.
It's much better.
It has helped to reduce smoking. Where we've got a problem with smoking at the moment from my research is younger people who still find it attractive, your 16s or 14s or 15s to 25s. That's what we've got to attack next. But I do, again, a bit agree with Abby that you can't have people almost snooping through your curtains. I don't agree with, this latest crazy idea they're going to ban you smoking in your own house or smoking in your garden. And
they can't do that anyway, can they? Wasn't it banned?
That is what's proposed.
Not in your house and garden. I think it was in public spaces, so outside pubs and bars.
Well, in Scotland, they're proposing... Notice the people on this were both Scottish. In Scotland, they've gone so far left, they have proposed, they may even be doing it, where you can listen to people's conversations in their home.
You can do that already with those listening devices.
Alexa?
Because they're all listening to you anyway.
Alexa, is that Humza Yousaf down there?
But also, I don't think we should be so harsh on smokers. Years ago, I was. More and more people aren't smoking. More and more people are trying to give up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about giving the vapes, which is why I asked that question.
I don't think
how do you get them off the vapes? And when you rightly interrupted and said, well, want you to get off, he's got 150 shops, which is a fair point. So I don't agree with that. And the other thing I would say, some of the stuff, it smells horrible.
What, the vapes?
The vapes. Have you
Oh,
seen
I hate being in the vape cloud. That makes me quite
Have you been
angry.
in the raspberry vape cloud?
Oh, it's horrible. I
Raspberry vape cloud.
I don't like any of it. I don't like any of it. I think
name.
it's, I think it's just swapping one evil for another, and you don't know the outcome for that one. Again, it's like the climate change. It's like everything. Well, don't do this, do that instead. But hang on, everything has an effect. So what is the effect? And even though it might not be the same as smoking, it could be something worse.
Yeah,
We don't know.
And also,
we literally don't know. And he avoided that, and rightly so, because he's got a shot.
And also, interestingly, Pfizer, who introduced Champix, are now being sued because Champix was a tablet you took to get you off nicotine. Now they're being sued.
Well, I don't know all the detail for that, but we can kind of
So we'll avoid that one.
Well, I will avoid it because I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't like to talk about things I don't know what I'm talking about. But this is are you on Facebook? That's the question. Most people are. They've announced yesterday it was renaming its parent company to Meta. So I don't think they're renaming Facebook Meta, a MetaBook or whatever it would be, or MetaFace. It also gave a sneak peek at some new tech that wouldn't look out of place in an episode of Black Mirror. Its new project, Cambria headset, will transport people into the metaverse, a virtual online universe where we can socialise, work and meet other people from across the globe. And you can see here, it's basically our lives online. How boring is that? Why would you want to just put the headset on and go nowhere? We'll all end up really fat. I'm joined by our futurist and chairman of the Futures Forum 2030, Mal Fletcher. Mal, welcome to the programme. What do you make of this?
Hello, Nana. Great to speak with you. Yeah, look, it's not a new idea, actually. It's been around for a long time, this metaverse idea. I think Facebook would love to claim that it invented it. It didn't. It basically, as you suggested, means a future version of the internet. It starts with 3D virtual spaces. You and I could get together in a virtual room using virtual reality tech. And as the tech becomes more sophisticated, we could feel like we're in the room together. But it goes further than that. It's a kind of unifying application of the entire internet, drawing together all things digital, from artificial intelligence to cybercurrency to games to augmented reality and more. And its starting point might be what you were showing in that clip, the sort of sociable media, which is the next iteration of social media. So I think it's going to turn the internet experience into a much more immersive one, but that will multiply its impact, both positive and negative at the same time.
It's a bit like Total Recall, isn't it? When he went on that trip, he put that, and he was it real, wasn't it real? Do you not think people are going to start to get confused with what is real and what isn't real?
Well, they may do. I have other concerns about it too, relating to data collection and the way that it affects our thinking, our brains. Neuroscientists have warned us for a very long time now that our heavy engagement with digital tech may actually be rewiring our brains, so that instead of using reason and logic when we communicate, we tend to become more hyper-emotional in the way we talk to each other online. Facebook's own research into social media finds that messages get more eyeballs when they provoke anger more than empathy. And people today often prefer hot responses to more calm and measured ones online. So imagine how much greater that problem might be if we supercharge our internet engagement with this much more immersive metaverse idea.
The other thing is, as you said, the reality is you don't feel the comeback, do you? Because it's not real, really, in your head. You're just working with something that doesn't really exist, but it does. When you say meetings and stuff, could this be how COP26 could have perhaps been done, instead of them all flying there on private jets?
Yeah, well, it's one of the positive sides of this kind of technology is cutting down carbon emissions with business conferences, political summits and so on. The other one is increasing collaboration, where people can much more readily swap ideas in a much more almost physical way to solve global problems. But one of the other challenges I've looked at in our research is what we call shallow think. Studies show that largely because of the way we multitask online, which will increase with the metaverse, we tend to think broad and shallow rather than narrow and deep. So we know a little about a lot rather than a lot about a little, and we don't specialise as much as we once did, and yet specialists are still very important. And there's also the issue, by the way, of confirmation bias, which has become huge during COVID-19. When we go online, we know algorithms and bots guide us to information and experiences they think we'll like based on our previous data. But when it comes to ideas and issues, that means we can find our horizons shrink. We keep reading more and more opinions that align with our own. We don't grow, we don't learn. And that's why conspiracy theories are so big today. And I think that could get worse with the metaverse if it's not handled correctly.
And also, well, there's somebody else in control of it as well. Thank you so much, Mal. It's really good to talk to you. That's Mal Fletcher. He's the Futurist Chairman 2030. Right, let's talk to the panel. Could you imagine this could be quite immersive? You wouldn't actually be here, but I would just be doing this thing in the head, and then you'd just be somewhere else with a headset on, just chatting, but you won't actually be here. Does that work for you? Does that?
No, it doesn't. I think we've given enough power and enough of our personal information to people like Mark Zuckerberg or whatever his name is, and I think we've got a situation now where those two, Facebook and Twitter, are completely out of control. And the thing he said about the best analogy. One of the greatest things to do, in my opinion, on a wet afternoon is go into a traditional bookshop and look at books and decide, find a book that you might not have found.
If they've got a little coffee shop in the bookshop as well, the cake.
Or in the library.
Lemon drizzle cake, cup of tea.
But you don't do that nowadays because you go on Amazon and it tells you what books you probably want. And it's the same with Facebook. And very worrying this week, they've been talking about how the algorithms can press whichever side of whatever particular argument you're on, can send you things that confirm your bias. That's not good. That's why we end up with, let's have trigger warnings on...
Little House on the
Little
Prairie.
House on the Prairie.
Yeah. Well, that's why when you're surfing the web, things that it thinks you want are fed to you.
And that is dangerous, isn't it? It's very, very dangerous. And I would say perhaps Facebook have already overstepped that mark and Twitter because they're already doing that to you. So if you believe in, I don't know, that COVID's a great conspiracy. I'm not having a go at you. But if that's what you believe, that's what you're going to get. And if you, like me, where I think, get vaxxed, can't wait for Tuesday because I'm having the booster. But that's what you're going to get.
I'm so turned on.
It's not good, though, is it? It's not good for intellectual debate, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this is what's... it is worrying because this whole, alternative universe, where you put the thing on, like, I love the back of Mark Zuckerberg's head. Just looked really odd, like he was wearing a helmet. And like he's had his hair cut by his mum and he lives in her basement. But it's literally...
with a little thing on his head?
Yeah, it's just kind of weird, like a Roman... It always reminds me of a Roman emperor who's about to behead somebody.
Do you mean like Tweety Pie in Miggy in Buck Rogers? What was his name? Miggy.
The somebody...
Roadrunner.
No. What was that thing with the helmet on that go Miggy? Okay, Buck. I can't remember what his name was.
That's Mark Zuckerberg.
Could you work on that impression for next week? We might have a chat.
They know what it is, don't you?
It's basically, it's like he's a child. This is what I worry about, is we've got children who are in charge of technology that they shouldn't be in charge of. And, the Twitter guy who looks like Rasputin and his politics match, it is weird that we're going to be... Are people actually going to ever sort of be tactile with each other again?
And when are we going to meet people? When are we going to go to a pub?
We might not want to, though, especially with COVID about. Now, listen, it's time for our quick fire debate. I'm joking. I love going out. Right, it's time for our quick fire debate, the part of the show where we pick some standout stories and have a discussion about them. So I've got my trusty buzzer. It's a little bit broken because it flew off the top of my laptop and landed on the floor. So I apologise as a trusty buzzer. But when you hear that, you need to be quiet, all right, when you hear it. And if you don't hear it, I'll just throw it at you. No, I won't do that. Right, first up, do you like period dramas?
Oh,
what are you going to say, then?
Honestly, my whole life flashed in front of me.
Right. Well, listen, do period dramas paint unrealistic pictures of the past? Ben Lawrence has written in The Telegraph that the BBC's adaptation of Riley Road, which is about UK fascism in the 1960s, exaggerated the size of the movement. So do you think these programmes in the past tend to sort of be totally inaccurate?
Well, I don't know about totally inaccurate. I mean, if it's on the BBC, it's going to be very left-wing, isn't it? And anti what most British people think. And I've watched that programme.
You don't know that?
I do.
I think there is a little bit of... I haven't actually watched this. I don't watch anything on the mainstream media anymore. I haven't watched the news, I haven't watched anything. So, to be honest with you, if I'm speaking about this, it would be purely because I've seen on Twitter many people say, oh, my goodness, they've totally rewritten the threat of fascism.
Oh, here we go. No, I'm going to stop you there. Right, those of you who are worried about the inflated cost of Christmas turkeys this year should fear not. A mum of three from Edinburgh has told how she made full Christmas dinner for 5 people for just £5. She brought the meat reduced in October and then she froze it. So do you think that we could cook dinner fit for a king for a £5, Abby?
For a £5? I'm just trying to think what I'd get. I'd probably get all the caviar I possibly could.
For a £5?
That'd be like one little bit.
I know a bloke. I know a nice geezer, Russian. I can get it cheap. And,
I don't think it's going to be caviar, look.
Although I should have let this story progress. What else? Nothing else with the caviar.
Nothing else with the caviar. And I'm trying to think what else can we have with caviar. I don't know what I'm saying. What else we could have with caviar?
Well, go on then, John.
Well, she'd be great, wouldn't it? I'd love to go around her house. She'd be a ball of fun. But let me tell you about my brother-in-law. Last year he said, "Oh, come for Christmas at our house. It's our turn to do it." Yeah, that'd be great, OK? He said, "I'm getting a goose." And I thought, oh, goose, I hate goose. It's all greasy and horrible. Anyway, 2 days before Christmas Day, he went down with COVID. So he didn't even go and pick up the goose. So we had Christmas at home. I think we probably had caviar. And then, this year, the turkey farm or the goose farm, wherever he was getting it from, rang him up just a couple of weeks ago and said, "We've still got your goose, do you want it?" So he phones me and says, "Hey, John, do you want to come round and have that goose next weekend?" It was like, "No, thanks. It's been in the freezer for
the COVID goose, you never know. Thank you very much. That's quite good. Now, let's move on. What do small holes, being without your phone, tin openers and belly buttons all have in common? Well, they've all made it into the top 30 most common fears in the UK. That's according to a study commissioned by craft beer maker Beavertown.
There's a theme developing here.
So juvenile.
I didn't say anything. What's this in your mind? What's your biggest fear then? Your strangest fear?
What was that? Belly buttons and
Beavertown or whatever.
Do you know what? I was
yours?
once on a tour. This was years ago when I was doing music. I was on a tour going to Africa. We were flying in a tiny plane, me and the band. And I was like this, I think I'm going to be... And I'm not joking. And the girl next to me went, "I've got a phobia about anyone who's sick. You can't be..." She said that to me, and I was feeling queasy. So she was afraid... Sorry, please.
Your strangest fear?
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of anything. Well, what do you mean, afraid of what? How can you be afraid of your belly button? Being able to see my belly button
Are you scared
would
of
be an
moths?
improvement.
Are you scared of moths? Are you scared of spiders?
No, of course
Mice?
not.
Rats?
No.
Like, if you're scared of rats, don't go to COP26.
Scottish rats.
No, it's things like with spiders. When people are scared of spiders, they're stupid, because the spiders are there to eat the insects. Oh, you're scared of them, aren't you?
I'm not scared of spiders.
I think you are.
What it is, I don't like any insects with a face. So if you look at an insect that can actually look at you in your eyes, then I'm a bit concerned.
In your eyes?
Did you see...
Now, our
did you see
big
the Elton
debate
John?
this hour... No, I didn't.
No,
now,
this is
our big
important.
debate this hour has really got you going. We've had even more of your views on e-cigarettes. Could they be prescribed on the NHS for the first time to help quit traditional cigarettes? So today I've been asking whether there should be a levy for smokers, and I was very much against smoking. Steve says I was very much against smoking and can't stand to be around it, but discriminating against someone because if it's a bad habit, it's problematic. What next? Diet, alcohol, horse riding, outdoor pursuits. There are many activities that increase likelihood of needing medical care. Excluding some on moral grounds is a very slippery slope, Abby. He's used your words. Yes, Claire says the smokers keep the NHS going. Jim says it's a ridiculous thought. We all do daft things. Will they levy people who have injuries from preventable accidents? Shouldn't be any discrimination, otherwise taxpayers have a right to demand refunds. After all, NHS isn't really free. And according to our Twitter poll, 44% of you say yes and 56% of you say no. So the overall verdict is that we shouldn't put a levy on smokers. Fair enough. I think we should. I'm going to say thank you so much to my panel. Abby Roberts, thank you very much for joining me.
Lovely to be here.
And also John Gaunt, thank you so much. Wonderful. And as ever, thank you to you for your company. It's been a pleasure as ever. I'll be back tomorrow at 4. But now it's time to take a look at the weather forecast and see how it's shaping up. Enjoy your evening.
We have further weather warnings in force right the way through the weekend and into the start of next week. More heavy rain in the forecast on top of the already saturated ground from the last few days. And the reason things are quite so unsettled, a big area of low pressure in the Atlantic sweeping various weather fronts right the way across the country. And there's more of that to come. In fact, the next one already waiting in the wings. This will bring another band of rain our way, heading in from the west through the course of this evening and overnight. And again, there will be some very heavy downpours associated with that band of rain. Either side, there will be some drier conditions, but with quite a lot of cloud associated with that band of rain, it won't be a particularly cold night for most of us. So Saturday starts on a wet note across western parts of the UK, and that band of rain will continue to trundle its way eastwards. It is actually moving slightly more quickly than some of the previous weather fronts have over the last few days, which is good news. And there are better conditions following on behind. So through Saturday afternoon and into the evening, drier conditions arrive from the west. Always the chance of a blustery shower, but some drier spells in between. And that's the case as we move through Saturday night. A lot of dry weather around, a few showers popping up here and there, especially across western parts of the country. And then yet another band of rain starts to edge in from the Atlantic. And this one will be with us first thing on Sunday morning. So it's a repeat performance for Sunday. Again, a wet start to the day for many of us, especially across western parts of the country. That rain, again, with some heavy downpours associated with it, gradually begins to track its way east and northwards, with some clearer conditions following on behind, which is good news if you're heading out trick-or-treating. Dry weather for some of us, but it remains unsettled into next week.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dubes & Co, the show where we get into all the stories that have got you talking today. With Anglo-French relations taking yet another hit, how on earth are we going to resolve this situation? And e-cigarettes, they might be being prescribed free on the NHS. What do you think to that? And what about the internet? I mean, there's no denying it can be unsafe for kids. But just whose responsibility is it to teach them about online safety? And given Facebook have done a corporate rebrand, I wonder just how relevant is the name? I say this, of course, as someone who still reels from the fact that Urkel Fruits got renamed Starburst. Well, we'll have all that and more, but first, the headlines.
I'm Karen Roberts. This is your news at 6 o'clock. The UK hasn't ruled out military involvement in the ongoing dispute with France over post-Brexit fishing rights. French authorities are yet to release a British scallop vessel that was detained for not having a licence. French prosecutors have summoned the boat's captain to appear in court next August. The Environment Secretary, George Eustace, told GB News Navy vessels will be used if needed.
We want to try to resolve this dispute by getting France to understand and accept that those 55 vessels that haven't been granted a licence, probably aren't entitled to one. And if they're able to offer us the evidence that supports the applications, well, we'd process them. But for now, we're trying to de-escalate this. But we're also very clear that if France carries out the threats that they've made, then we will obviously make a proportionate response.
A retired accountant who stabbed her husband 3 times and left him for dead has been jailed for life. Penelope Jackson killed her husband of 24 years at their home in Somerset in February this year. Jackson had denied murder but pleaded guilty to manslaughter, claiming she'd lost control after years of physical and emotional abuse. The Prime Minister has told China's president that world leaders must do more to tackle the climate crisis. The extensive conversation took place as Greta Thunberg joined a rally in London to protest against the use of fossil fuels. During talks with President Xi Jinping, Boris Johnson stressed that all countries must take concrete action to cut emissions and to speed up their transition to renewable energy. The Chinese president has confirmed that he'll attend COP26 in Glasgow via video link. Scotland's First Minister has called on climate protesters not to disrupt the COP26 summit. Nicola Sturgeon said progress will not be made in Glasgow if discussions are disrupted. Major demonstrations are currently planned for Friday the 5th and Saturday the 6th of November. While accepting that disruption is inevitable, Ms Sturgeon did ask protesters to show consideration. The Queen has been advised to rest for at least the next 2 weeks. Her Majesty's doctors say that she can undertake light, desk-based duties but should not make any official visits. Buckingham Palace confirmed that Her Majesty will be unable to attend the Festival of Remembrance on the 13th of November. However, she does intend to present for Remembrance Sunday on the 14th. The Scottish Government is providing £41 million to help families with their winter bills. The cash will be made available for those on low incomes who are struggling to pay for energy. It'll also help those at risk of homelessness. £6 million from the pot will go to charities that work with families in need. Former One Direction singer Zayn Malik has entered a plea deal in the US after being charged with 4 counts of harassment. Court records reveal the singer was charged following a row at his home with socialite and mother of his partner, Yolanda Hadid. Rather than plead guilty, he agreed to not to fight the charges. Mr. Malik has been placed on probation for 360 days and must complete an anger management class, a domestic violence program, and must not have contact with Ms. Hadid. MPs are warning the Crossrail project is facing a £150 million funding gap. The Commons Public Accounts Committee expressed doubts over how and when taxpayers' loans will be repaid. That's after the collapse in fares revenue due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's predicted the cost of finishing the project is now at £18.9 billion. Boris Johnson has lent his support to the Royal British Legion's centenary appeal ahead of its 100th year, raising funds for veterans. The Prime Minister bought a poppy on the steps of 10 Downing Street today before urging everyone to buy a remembrance symbol. Founded in 1921, the Poppy Appeal also raises funds for serving personnel and their families. Well, that's all your news for now. Let's now get back to Dubes & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, with me until 7 o'clock, my lovely panel, glorious panel, also known as the Cur. Joining me tonight, we have Gavin Rice, Policy Director at the Centre for Social Justice and former Special Advisor to the Brexit Secretary, Steve Barclay. Also author Nick Tyrone and Mary Dujewski, who is a columnist at The Independent. Good evening to all of you. Also, you know the drill by now. It's not just about us and our thoughts, it's about you and yours as well. So do get in touch with me tonight. Let me know all of your thoughts on the topics that we've got and anything else, quite frankly, you feel like talking to us about tonight. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dubes or at GBNews, or of course you can get in touch with us on Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. There's a huge list, and you can of course watch on YouTube. You might be already, and if you are, hello. Anyway, yesterday, you might recall that we updated you on the Anglo-French relations with the news of a British fishing trawler having been detained on the coast of Le Havre. Well, since then, the skipper of that trawler has been charged, the French ambassador has been summoned to the Foreign Office, 2 Royal Navy patrol vessels were put on a state of high readiness, and the trawler is still detained. Here's Environment Secretary George Eustace speaking to GB News earlier.
I think in the first instance that using diplomatic channels is the right thing to do. And of course, France, as an EU member, doesn't decide its own fishing policy. That's set by the EU, and the EU represent France internationally when it comes to fisheries. So we're raising it with the European Commission, since they've got a role in making sure France abides by the law and abides by the terms of the agreement. But we're also raising it diplomatically, and we think that is the right thing to do in the first instance. But obviously, if France carries through the threats that they've made, and they've suggested they might be doing this from Tuesday, were they to do that, then obviously we reserve our options to, to respond in a proportionate way in kind.
Well, I've got to say, with so many other things to focus on right now, we need this row with France like we need a hole in the head. So, how do we sort this out? Nick, I come to you to fix this. It's only gone on for a few months, after all.
Well, 2 things to say about it in brief. One is that I think the way this started, we have to look back at the Brexit deal a little bit, particularly given we were told in the build-up to it, that all sorts of things like the British fishermen were going to get 80% of the waters back. It was going to the deal was going to be, the lead into it was going to be very brief, and what we ended up with was something quite disappointing, which was 25% over 5.5 years. So I think what we've had is Boris Johnson slightly puffing out his chest a bit, and then we've ended up in this position. I think it's slightly got out of hand from Number 10's perspective. I think the other thing to say is there's a slight, I think as you alluded to in your comments, a slight fiddling while Rome burns here. We've got Britain and France, 2 UN Permanent Secretary members fighting over fish at a time when there are, we've got COVID still to deal with. We've obviously got the rise of China as a major power threatening, liberal, the liberal democracy hegemony, if you like. So it's disappointing.
I've got to say, Gavin, it's undeniable that one of the root causes of this is Brexit. Of course, we were all told that there's an oven-ready deal. It was all sorted. All we have to do is kind of vote for the Tories and we'd be sailing off into sunlit uplands. What are we going to do to resolve this? I mean, most viewers now will be familiar with the situation. It seems to be a very peculiar argument about who can go in this close territorial water, and it boils down to details such as, can certain vessels prove that they were previously fishing in this water? And a small percentage of them can, and it seems that that is where this has all stemmed from.
Yes, I think it's very clear that actually, I think, I agree with Nick that this has really spiralled out of hand. I think it's gone far beyond where it needed to go. I think fundamentally this is actually a technical issue to do with the licensing of vessels in UK or EU waters, and that's fundamentally what it comes down to. The reason for that historical prohibition, you have to show that you were fishing in these waters, is that the idea was that the proportion of EU vessels in UK waters would be gradually winding down rather than increasing, so they didn't want new vessels registering. It just seems to come down to the expiry of licences. There is a dispute resolution mechanism within the withdrawal agreement and within the UK-EU trade and cooperation agreement, and I think we should be using that dispute resolution mechanism. This is something that should be resolved diplomatically. I think the talk of sanctions and retaliation, I think the French fisheries minister even said this is a fight rather than a war. I think that's really to unnecessarily increase the rhetoric here.
Yeah, let's just remind ourselves, just before I bring Mary in, some of these sanctions that have been discussed. So we did look at these as well yesterday. So they're talking about banning British fishing vessels in some French ports, the reinforcement of customs and hygiene controls, routine security checks on British vessels, and the reinforcement of controls on lorries to and from the UK. Threatening that from Tuesday, apparently, Mary, if we can't get this solved by then.
I know, it seems extraordinary, doesn't it? Because it looks like such a small dispute.
that somehow spawned these enormous ramifications. Bringing in the ambassador who was called in today, which is something quite, it's quite an extreme thing to do for what looks like a dispute which involves waters. I mean, not just sort of shared waters, but quite a small area around the Channel Islands. And there seems to be a problem with licences issued specifically by Jersey, that Guernsey has been issuing its licences, but Jersey hasn't. So, it's very hard to see this as a problem that should have run as much out of control as it has done.
Yeah, and Nick, it's almost as well broader than just this whole thing. I blame a lot of this on the fact that it's election year next year, that Macron has got to make himself out to be the big I am, if you like to put it simplistically. He's got people like Marine Le Pen who are pushing at him to kind of protect the fishermen. It's a very loved industry in France. So you've got Marine Le Pen pushing, well, snapping at the heel, should I say, of Macron. She wants his place. You've got people like Michel Barnier also want that role. So, but it's more complex than this, because also when it comes to our relationship, we've got the migrant situation. We're spending a lot of money with France there. We've seen the whole kind of fallout of the AUKUS deal. So it is quite a complex thing, but made worse in my mind by the election.
Certainly. I mean, the fact that April next year, the French go to the polls to elect a new, well, or re-elect the same president, as it may be, is certainly, there's no question that is a factor in all of this. It's unfortunate that we've ended up in this situation. As I say, I just think it's really unfortunate that Britain and France have come to loggerheads on something that is really a technical issue.
And do you think we're going to get it resolved by Tuesday? I don't. I've got to say, I'm wondering what we're going to wake up to on Tuesday, whether or not they will follow through with some of their sanctions.
Well, we may have queues of lorries by Tuesday morning on both sides of the channel, but I sort of think with COP26 opening at the weekend, it would be very hard for the British government to be trying to run that dispute at the same time. So I sort of doubt it. I would also, just as a completely sort of left field small fact, bring in that when I was looking at all this, it turns out that yesterday, even as there was a British trawler under French control, there was a French submarine in Faslane at the naval base in Scotland, so that if the British really wanted to exact some sort of retaliation, they could have held the submarine. I mean, so it's obviously not gone that far yet.
Yeah, and by the way, the trawler man he was charged. We broke it yesterday that the trawler had been detained. It's still detained, by the way. The skipper there, he has been charged, and he's due to face a criminal trial in a French court next year. I mean, what do you think the UK government should do next?
Well, I mean, I think there has to be a diplomatic solution to this. The UK-EU agreement does provide for reasonable and proportionate retaliation to take place if it's justified, but then I think you need to look at whether the circumstances do justify it. What I would say is that, and I agree with Nick that the settlement for fisheries control was a little bit of a compromise, but there is a mechanism at the end of 2026 where the UK could, in theory, just cancel EU access to UK waters. It seems to me as though it should be in the European Union's interests, really, to make sure this does work so that we don't have to take that sort of drastic measure in a few years' time.
Well, get in touch and let me know your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I wonder, e-cigarettes, do you think that they should be prescribed on the NHS?
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Good evening, welcome back. Now, 7 million people in the UK are tobacco smokers. Are you one of them? Are you a former smoker? Or are you, like me, someone that's never smoked a cigarette? Well, the reason I ask this is because in an apparent world first, in an effort to help those people quit smoking, e-cigarettes could be made available through the NHS. E-cigarette manufacturers can now submit products to go through the same regulation approvals such as other medicines. This could mean that England becomes the first country in the world to prescribe e-cigarettes as a medical product. Should it? Gavin, should it do this?
Well, I think it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? Because e-cigarettes are not without risks. They do contain nicotine and they are, bad for you. But the issue is that they're less bad for you than cigarettes are. And I suppose the thinking here is that if your doctor thinks that e-cigarettes could be a way in which someone who is addicted to smoking and wants to get off of that addiction could be helped in order to do so, that could be a way forward. I mean, the view that I take on this is probably that if that's the GP's opinion and he thinks that there is a strong medical case for that, then maybe that's something that can be done via prescription.
Are you a smoker?
No, I'm not a smoker. I've had the odd cigarette at a party, but never regularly.
What do you think to this, Mary? The whole I have